a writer and editor and such. And Chuck, before we actually begin, this question is what I have right now. What old person things do you do?
Ooh, wow. What old person things do I do? That's a really good one. Um, boy, oh boy. You know what? I drink a lot of water. You know, and I know that sounds really funny. I should have been prepped for that because I watched some of your videos. I watched the Biff
You
Naked
did.
one, and I should have been prepped for that.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm drinking a lot of water and making sure that I stay very hydrated and all that kind of stuff. And to me, that's a very old person thing. Also, because I have a lot of British in my family, I drink an awful lot of Earl Grey tea.
Earl Grey? Who are you,
Yes,
Captain Picard? Holy cow! No, I'm just
exactly,
kidding.
right?
I'm just kidding. So, so thank you for putting me in a good mood because I really need it right now. I want to thank you for coming on. You are a writer and obviously an author if you're a writer. Holy cow! And an editor as well. So, how did you get into that? What do you do? What's your purpose
Okay,
with it?
that's you know what? I've always loved writing, and most importantly, I've always loved creating stories. And so I always, from a very young age, I've tried to write books and all that kind of stuff, and it was always there was just so much to writing a book and creating a book, and there were certain things that I had difficulties with and that I didn't enjoy. The actual creation of story I love, but then sitting down and describing a scene for someone, it just bogged me down, and I it was my least favorite part of writing.
Yeah.
And so I remember writing a comic probably back in 2007 or so. And I wrote this book and I just kind of let it go off into the world. I sent it to a friend to draw, and not an awful lot came of it. And then in 2015, by then I had already left Canada and I'd moved down to Texas. We were moving into a new house, and Cable Guy came over and he saw all of our Marvel uh, artwork on the wall and my swords and all that kind of stuff. And he immediately said, "Hey man, do you love comics?" I said, "Yeah, I've loved comics most of my life." And so he started pitching me his book, this idea that he had. And he was a local dude, and so we talked about it. And then eventually we started hanging out, and it got to the point where I wrote his book. And so I
Mm-hmm.
wrote the first issue of that, and sadly, it never they're still working on it, and it's been about 5 years or so. So they're
Mm-hmm.
still working on it, and they're in the art phases. But I got so excited by finally making something and getting something done, and I was kind of on this crossroads of, do I continue with this or do I not? I had started editing in order to get my name out there, and a good buddy of mine from Toronto, he said, "Dude, you've got a gift. You got to keep going." He gave me that script back that I'd written in 2007. He said, "Why don't you finish it and let's make this a comic?" And I did. And in 2018, Welcome to the Void, that book that I had written back in 2007, what came out. And since then, I've just been editing and writing and working constantly.
That's fantastic.
Thanks.
Holy cow! That's a lot there. So, as a trying to collect my thoughts. I didn't freeze up
No,
on you. I
I
apologize.
gave you a mouthful. You're good.
Yes. Yeah. So here's the thing about that. There's a lot of history there. But where does it go back even further than that? Because obviously, as a kid, you had to be a fan of something. So what were the things that you grew up on and the things that you really thrived on?
uh, you know, it was always about detailed story. And it's so funny the things I remember loving when I was a kid. I love G.I. Joe, love Transformers. Do you remember the old Teddy Ruxpin story? The
Yeah.
It was so funny because that thing seemed so hokey. But when you watched that show, as much as it felt like this Barney kind of atmosphere to it, like, we love everybody. The show
Yeah.
had this huge, beautiful fantasy, and there was all these neat things. There was his dad was had been into had amnesia or something, and he ended up showing up as this mysterious figure years later, and there was old temples, and it was so neat. So I loved that. Loved like J.R.R. Tolkien. Even I remember being like 11 and reading The Hobbit, loving all that kind of stuff. Being around the same age and getting into a lot of fantasy novels and stuff. So anything fantastical and whatnot, it caught me at a very young age.
Okay. That's That's fantastic. You know, all that stuff caught a generation at a young age, and we it's now called nerd culture, right? But I'm not sure if that's the right term, right? I think it's just culture in general. As a small publisher, because you're you're not Random House, right? You're a small
Yeah,
press.
absolutely.
What are your goals with what you want to do?
So my goals are less about publishing and more about being published. So really what it's about is I want to elevate myself, elevate my craft, be the best version of myself as far as writing and editing is concerned. And I want to get my name on as many books. And I think that's something that surprised a lot of people is that I really came out of the gates flying. So, you have people who, as writers, in the indie world, it's so expensive to make a book, especially a comic book. You're talking thousands of dollars to make a single book. So it's very difficult, very expensive. I'm not a rich man by any means. And so editing allowed me to make money to put towards my own stuff. And so right out of the gates, I worked as much as I possibly could. And in the past 2.5 or so years, I'd say my name has probably been attached to anywhere from 30 to 50 books.
That's a lot of that's prolific. It really
Thank you.
is. That's amazing. When you're writing, where does the inspiration come from when you're doing this? Where does it really happen?
Um, it comes from so many different places. Uh, with Welcome to the Void, it was all about the fact that I felt in comics, especially, but also just in we talk about nerd culture. In nerd culture, magic was this very hokey, lame, Doctor Strange, and this was before the Doctor Strange movie, but Doctor Strange, Merlin, like it was just this old people who had stars on their clothes, and it was very lame. And so I wanted to make magic cool, and I wanted to really explore almost as if magic was real. And so I really tried to tie it into our own reality, not as if, what if magic was real, but more like, no, magic is real in our world, and this is how it shows up, and use actual real life occurrences to prove that magic was there, and then to take it to an even further fantastical level. So it's really about just seeing the things around you, playing with them. Even sometimes, like we had a very traumatic incident that happened to us about 4 years ago. And so I'm currently working on something to kind of deal with all of that while not actually having to necessarily deal with it, not having to tell everyone the details of what happened, and just trying to put, say, like a fantastical spin on it, making it something different, and yet I still get to express what happened.
That's awesome. I like that. So I'm sorry, you've given me so much to think about that it's hard to deal. When you're writing, when you're doing this stuff, that when you're creating, do you get sucked into it like many other authors? Is it where you're there for 3 days and you can't put the book down and you're just being creative?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say 3 days, but yes. In fact, I have my good buddy Eric Cockrell and we have an audio drama that we've worked on together. And I remember I was working on the season finale of it, because we just finished season 1. It's all out there to air. It's called Essence House, if you guys want to check it out. And I had the season finale, which is just such a big thing. And I knew that I had about 3 days to get it all done and edited. And I had done a little bit of work on it, and I decided, I'm gonna do another big chunk. And because the beats were so dramatic and emotional and action oriented, anytime I would finish one thing, I would immediately be excited to do the other. And it went from, oh, I'm gonna at 8 o'clock at night do a little bit of writing, to literally being 2:16 in the morning and going, done. Like the story is done. I will look at it and fix it in the morning, but it's all on paper. So yeah, I certainly do get carried away.
That's I hear that from artists all the time about how they get sucked in and how it's almost a spiritual experience with what they do. So is that the case for you? Maybe not spiritual, but do you feel connected, I guess?
Yeah, you know what? I remember, my wife is a writer as well, and she's working on her first series of books. And I remember trying to talk to her last night. I said, "Hey, baby, do you need some help with anything?" She said, No, I'm flowing." I was like, "Okay, great." And I knew exactly what that meant. When you're in the flow,
Awesome.
just leave me alone. I'm not even in control anymore. It's something is coming into me and going straight on to paper or the laptop or whatever. So it certainly feels like a spiritual experience.
That's fantastic. Where do people find you if they want to get your stuff? Bonfire Press obviously is on Facebook. However, is there other ways to see your stuff?
Bonfire Place is the main place. Also on Facebook, you can look up Belial Comic, and that is
Okay.
a big comic that I'm doing with my good buddy Sean Barber. We're currently working on the second issue. I'm so proud of that one. Love what we've done with that one. And the other thing is Essence House, which is the audio drama. That's a time travel family drama, and you can find that on any of the major podcast networks, or you can just go to essencehousestory.com.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Before we end off, I'm going to end off a little bit early because I need to go. However, before we end off, I always ask one closing question, and that is, what have you done today to make yourself happy? And it can't be this interview because let's face it, this has been fantastic.
I've had a good time too. Thanks, Jesse. You know what? If I'm being completely honest, I haven't yet.
Okay.
I woke up, I took care of stuff. I literally just got back from grocery shopping and then came straight to you. So I believe the next thing I'm going to do is after this, I'm going to unwind with a hot cup of tea, and I'm probably going to finish editing a big graphic novel that I'm working on. And I
That's
think that will be my moment of zen.
That's awesome. Well, I want to thank you for coming on, Chuck. It's been fantastic. Thank you for being here, and we'll have you back anytime you want. Just let me know when you release new stuff.
I would absolutely love that. Thank you so much.
Chuck, I'm going to ask you to wave bye-bye to everybody. Bye-bye, everybody. And we're going to end the broadcast. See you, everybody.